The Jerusalem Gift Shop, 10% off everything. Coupon code ILTV.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Frenemies. I'm Jacob Ner David. I'm a member of the New Israel Fund Board of Directors. I'm here with Bar-Yoshafat, Deputy Director of the Kohelet Policy Forum.
A new bill proposition in the process in the Israeli parliament. The bill talks about the deportation of Palestinian terrorists who have committed a terror attack and a first-degree relative. What are your thoughts?
Well, I think we need to start with the second part, which is the families of the terrorists. I think on terrorists themselves, we can debate efficacy of deportation. When it comes to their families, I don't think there's a real debate. And if you look at within the Israeli government, people who are supposed to care about the legal aspect, before we even get to the morality of it, but the legal aspect, you have both the Attorney General and the Solicitor General saying this is an illegal act, it's against Israeli law, against international law, and should not go forward. Well,
I obviously disagree. First of all, similar laws have been passed in the US, Germany, Italy, and other countries, the UK. The law, I do agree with you that the first-degree relative is actually a problem here because I don't think it should be limited to first degree. You just came from Solana, you said...
Well, we're all cousins, so we could all leave, but...
No, the question is, did this person support or did not stop the terror activity? That is the main question. Now, if it's someone's cousin instead of someone's brother, but that person helped with the terrorist activity, then that person should definitely, in my opinion, should also be deported. I think that the family ties has nothing to do with it. The real question is that person is assistant of a terror activity.
For sure. So then, exactly as you said, it has nothing to do with family ties.
But that's what the bill says.
But that's why the bill is wrong. So instead of looking at family ties, let's look at co-conspirators, people who are involved in terrorist activities, and then we can agree or disagree, but definitely not their families.
Okay, so just let's make sure that we're on the same page. The law is a very short, simple, the bill proposition, it's very short and simple. It has 2 articles. It says that you can deport, and then it sets the criteria. And it definitely says someone who has either supported or did not do anything to stop, knowingly, the terrorist activity. So I don't think that the question is if it's a first-degree relative. The question is the second article that says this person either actively helped or didn't do anything to stop while knowing that this person is about to commit a terrorist activity. So why does it matter if it's his brother or his cousin or even not a family member?
Exactly. So why did it even start off as a discussion about family members? And that's exactly what we heard in the Knesset, and that's exactly what people were shouting about in the Knesset that we saw a few seconds ago, is that it was presented as family members, it was presented as some sort of revenge against their families. If we want to talk about deterrence and security, and again, then we should bring in security experts, which didn't happen in the Knesset, but we should bring in security experts and we can hear from them what really is a deterrent policy, what's not a deterrent policy, and then we can figure it out. But until then, we're talking about just lashing out completely on a political basis.
So first of all, there were a security expert, but the issue is this. The law doesn't say we're going to punish a first-degree relative because of someone committing a terror attack. The law says we will punish a first-degree relative because that person helped or did not stop knowingly the terrorist activity. Now, why is it only first relative and not second relative or third relative or not relative? The reason is because for the past 600 terror attacks that we've had in the past month in Israel, a lot of them had first-degree relatives. I would like to expand the proposition, I hope it will during the process, because the Solana terror attack had 2 cousins, the Machamra family from Yatta. So the reason why the Israeli legislator thought to say first-degree relative is because usually the people who helped are the first-degree relative. But I do hope that because this is just the beginning of the process, they will expand it. The law is not saying I'm going to collectively punish family members because of the acts of an individual. That's not how democracies work. The law specifically says it's because of family members who, again, either actively helped the terrorist activities or did not prevent them knowingly that they're going to happen.
So again, that is, as you know, a huge Pandora's box that gets open in terms of who decides and on what basis it gets decided as to whether somebody knew and then did, and what did it mean to really know, and then what does it mean to not to prevent. And again, I think if 9/10 is perception, and if you look to see the way this is being perceived, it's being perceived as lashing out against family members who don't necessarily have any connection. Now you can say the law provides for that, right? The law provides that there should be some connection. That's a very wide definition. If the law, as it goes through the Knesset, gets much more refined, and we can have a really clear guideline, then great. Right now, it's not a clear guideline.
Or maybe some people are trying to present this bill as something that it's not. And I do agree with you that it needs to be more specific.
The Attorney General of the State of Israel said this bill should not move forward. He obviously had a basis for that, and this is somebody appointed by the current Prime Minister.
We can have a whole discussion about the legal status of the Attorney General and how and what is his role, saying what is and what is not constitutional. Right now, the Israeli Supreme Court said that the basic law is not constitutional. That's a whole big debate in Israel. But what I'm saying is,
I'm saying is him as an individual, right? And somebody who we should respect their opinion. Forget whether constitutional or not constitutional. I'm not getting even to the legality. Just saying when the Attorney General and the Solicitor General of the State of Israel both say publicly that this bill should not move forward, that should send a strong signal to all of us.
What I've noticed is that sometimes people like to say what certain attorney generals say, if it's matching or not matching their agenda. Also, sometimes you can hear that the Supreme Court says, well, it's okay to demolish a certain area in Israel because it was built illegally, and all of a sudden people say, well, we don't agree with these people's opinion. Let's set a structure, a legal structure, that's okay either if you're in the coalition or opposition. But you mentioned it's against international law. So again, I'm arguing that in many countries in the world...
I was quoting the current Attorney General, but...
It wasn't a full quote because I read what he said this morning. But anyways, the point is that there are many countries who are using this. But I do agree with you. The law needs to be worked on. It's only the first process of the legislation, which, by the way, it's very unique for the Attorney General to meddle in the first steps of a legal process. We still have many debates in different committees.
For sure.
But the point is this. Will it help other people to stop doing any kind of terror activities in Israel? Some might say no. I would argue definitely yes. And the fact that you said it's very vague, I like to beg to differ because it's not very vague. There are many definitions of what is considered to be a terrorist activity or someone who is helping someone to commit an act of terror.
Right, but there are two things, two acts which have been used in our recent history. Right, one is deportations, and we can discuss what deportations means and from where to where. The other is house demolitions. And we can get into whether those have been effective as a deterrent, have not been, but that I don't think is really on the table right now for what we're debating about. I think what we're debating about is whether there was any real justification or positive potential effect of bringing a law like this through the Knesset right now, and what is it going to give?
The goal was and remains to neutralize and destroy Hezbollah's terror tunnels. The IDF has reported the existence so far of 4 terror tunnels in 4 separate geographical locations that begin in Lebanon and infiltrate Israel.
We face a situation in southern Lebanon where there's clear activity that is happening that's in violation of many different agreements. And also in the terms of the spirit of the agreements, the UN has not really acted or spoken out. Obviously, I think we all are upset with this. And then the question becomes what role the UN is really playing in southern Lebanon today, or has it ever played? What are your thoughts, Brian?
It's a great question. I think that UNIFIL, or as I like to call it, UNIFAIL, has really failed to fulfill its mandate. One of the main things that UNIFIL was supposed to make sure of is the disarmament of Hezbollah southern of the Litani River. And it has definitely not been able to do that. Actually, some say that the UNIFIL is cooperating with Hezbollah. Sometimes people say that Hezbollah is attacking UNIFIL. We just had an incident in August and is not being able to respond. So it seems like on the ground, UNIFIL is pretty much useless. The issue with the United Nations Security Council debate because the fact that they would pass a resolution against Hezbollah was very, we didn't really have a chance there. But the whole point of us even talking about it is very positive in my mind, because people sometimes forget the fact that Hezbollah is defined as a terrorist organization by Canada, US, Australia, even the European Union.
Yes. I actually, on this point, think we're in complete agreement. I don't think that UNIFIL has ever had the power, but it's not just UNIFIL or in this specific situation, it's other UN peacekeeping forces or whatever you want to term them, unfortunately have never had the power to really carry out their mission. And I think the UN needs to have a debate on a global basis, not only on a particular basis, which is to say, when you have a situation like this, when the point was for disarmament, what are the real tools at the disposal of a UN force, multinational force?
Well,
we saw the same thing in Sinai, by the way, where the multinational force has basically failed to keep Sinai a demilitarized zone.
It's a good question. The question I would like to ask is, why is the UN so relevant? Right now, in this same committee that was trying to debate should Hezbollah be condemned, they were actually condemning Israel.
Right.
And I think it's a bit absurd that you can see that the IDF is inviting UNIFIL and tells the UNIFIL, please look at the terrorist tunnels that we have here. You have tunnels that were dug by Hezbollah. Hezbollah has two main ways that he acts. He acts here in Israel using force, and he acts in Europe with his
patrons and
basically selling drugs, making money from selling drugs to different European countries. So Hezbollah is an evil entity, and the fact that the UNIFIL forces in Israel were not willing to cooperate with the IDF to just open their eyes and see the fact that Hezbollah is building tunnels into Israel, and then having the UN Security Council saying that Israel is violating Agreement 1701, which is the agreement after 2006, the Second Lebanon War, it makes me not really appreciate the United Nations in general.
Right. Unfortunately, few of us have a real appreciation of the United Nations, so I think that's another area where we can agree, where the promise of the United Nations is so far from the reality from it. And then we can ask the question, does the promise still shed any light? Is there any hope? Can we really infuse hope into an institution such as the United Nations? I still want to think yes, because I'm an optimistic person, and I think we need hope. I think the raison d'etre of the UN still stands. Unfortunately, the UN never lived up to what it was supposed to be. Again, nothing to do with Israel and the Middle East. Look around the world. The UN has failed to act. There are times when various UN leadership figures have risen to an occasion and have helped out. I hope that will happen here as well. So far, we're not seeing it.
So right now, when we know that Hezbollah is building tunnels in order to penetrate Israel and murder Israeli citizens, basically, and he has 100,000 rockets aiming at Israel, when Israel will retaliate, eventually I hope it will retaliate, what do you think should we do with the fact that the UN will condemn Israel?
For sure, the UN will. When we say the UN, right, we have to look at, what do we mean, whether it's the General Assembly, the Security Council, who on the Security Council, and so on. But I think the real question is not what the UN is going to say, and is what Israel needs to do, whether there is any hope on our northern front, and I'm not even talking about Syria, but particularly in Lebanon, whether there's any hope to go back to the days where we thought we could reach a peaceful border with Lebanon. Again, I would like to think we can, even with an actor who I agree is a bad actor, such as Hezbollah. Can Hezbollah be reformed? Can Hezbollah become a part of the political system? I would like to think yes, not because I have any love for Hezbollah or their policies, but just that's who we're dealing with.
But Jacob, Hezbollah was created because Israel, quote unquote, penetrated Lebanon in order to stop the Fatah people. Israel has withdrawn from the southern part of Lebanon. Basically, there should be no interaction between Hezbollah and Israel. That's not their mandate. But apparently, all they're doing so far is trying to think of ways to conquer parts of Israel. That's basically their main goal. They have a lot more manpower than they've ever had, and they have failed to go according to Agreement 1701 from 2006, meaning southern part of the Litani River should be demilitarized. But right now you have so many Hezbollah forces there. What are they doing there if not trying to hurt Israel?
For sure. There's a very weak Lebanese government, obviously. The Lebanese government itself has never really figured out what Hezbollah's real place is in a normal functioning government, past 2006 and pre-2006. So when you have a very weak federal government, it's unfortunately what's happened in Sinai on our southern border, when you have a very weak federal government, so people rise to the occasion to take control, to take power. And in terms of historically, how did Hamas get created? A similar vacuum and Hamas got created, and now we are dealing with
have won against ISIS. We've beaten them, and we've beaten them badly. We've taken back the land, and now it's time for our troops to come back home.
Hello, welcome back. From one northern border to another, United States says to withdraw its forces from Syria, about 2,000 troops, because they have defeated ISIS. How will that affect the Middle East? How will that affect Israel? How will that affect America? Jacob, your thoughts?
You know, the last time an American president said we won and the troops left somewhere 15 years later, that we were there was far from winning and a lot of losing going on. President Trump perhaps didn't look at a map of Syria this morning, but there are vast amounts of Syrian territory controlled by ISIS and ISIS-like forces. So to say that we won and therefore these troops are going home is, I would say, I don't want to say silly, but is far from the reality. Now, do those 2,000 troops make the difference between safety in Syria or not? Probably not. Symbolically, though, very important. And the question is, what is America, and does America have any role in what happens in Syria going forward? We saw in the past that President Trump had nice words to say about Bashar Assad, just like he has nice words to say about other strong-armed dictators in the world. Does he think that he's really going to take over and keep the peace? I want to be judging on the basis of merit and think that's what President Trump is thinking. Unfortunately, we know that the situation in Syria is far from settled and far from stable.
Well, I think Syria will be probably the easiest problem to handle. It seems like the only sides who are winning are the United States emissaries, meaning it's not just the forces of ISIS that are still there, ISIL. It's also the Kurds who are going to suffer because Turkey has already announced it's going to send and deploy its own forces to Syria. Russia is definitely going to take a chunk of that pie, and what I'm most concerned about is Iran. Now, John Bolton has stated that the United States will remain in Syria as long as there is an Iranian threat in Syria. The threat is not just towards Israel, it's a threat to all of the assets that America has in that region. So I'm not sure exactly what it means. We have to remember there are only 2,000 troops, U.S. troops on actual Syrian soil. The United States has been working in different ways, trying to arm rebels, to teach them how to fight, and so on and so forth. It also has a lot of influence in the region in general. It has battleships, it has bases all across. So I'm not even sure what it means that they're going to leave Syria.
Right. I think the symbolism is much more important here. In other words, you have a president of the United States who's making a very simplistic statement about a very complicated situation and saying, we won, which is what this president loves to say. Again, the reality is far from we won, whoever we is. Now, it's not even clear who we is, but it's very far from any kind of reality. And then we have to remember, if even Bashar Assad was the strong person that's going to fill the vacuum, from our point of view as Israel, and I think that's where we're thinking about first in terms of the safety of Israel, Bashar Assad is no friend. So let's kind of keep that in mind. If this is the person who's going to reconsolidate control, it's not like he's himself so friendly. And he was also allied with the very same people that we are not exactly enamored of. So you have this very complicated situation with Russia, who knows what their real agenda is, together with the Iranians, together with other forces like ISIS, who are much more anarchistic, if you will, and then a president saying, we won. I just don't see it.
It's very problematic. I have to say we only have two allies here. We have the Kurds and we have the United States. I don't want Syria on my border. I don't want Russia on my border. I don't want Turkey on my border. And I definitely do not want Iran on my border. I would love to have America on my border, but that should be a decision for America if they want it.
I don't know about that. But I think we have to be at our border. And I think that's the most important thing.
100%. Israel needs to defend itself. But I'm saying if I had to choose a neighbor, I'd rather have a democracy and not any type of dictatorship.
You'd love for all those people to go away and do some sort of swap with, I don't know, Kansas. But given that's not probably going to happen, especially because President Trump doesn't like immigrants, then I think we're stuck with our neighbors, and we need to figure out how to live with our neighbors. Unfortunately, I just don't see President Trump playing a role in there.
Well, but President Trump, the United States is not a monarchy, and I'm sure that President Trump has a lot of advisors, and they know that in the Middle East, if one power leaves, another power will come in. And I think that America needs to put America first. The second America leaves Syria, other forces are going to take over. These forces are either Turkey, Russia, or Iran. This will hurt the American interest by far.
It'll definitely hurt the American interest, but we also have to think more regionally in the instability of the region. It's not just a question of what happens in Syria. It wasn't so long ago that we didn't think the borders of Syria mattered anymore, right? It was a Swiss cheese of all kinds of people fighting each other. And I think if you look practically at the reality on the ground, it's not so far from that today. So it's really the instability of the region as a whole and how that spills over into Lebanon, how that spills into the Kurdish independence forces and so on, and the on-off relationships with Turkey, as you mentioned. So I think if President Trump did listen to his advisors, like the current Secretary of Defense in the United States, General Mattis, then I don't think he would have made that statement.
Or maybe there's something that's going on that we're not, that we don't know about. They still have battleships in the Mediterranean Sea. They still have different army bases all over the region. And maybe they're planning a next move that we're not...
Again, I wish I could judge on the basis of merit in this case. My opinion of President Trump is that he just rules by tweet and tries to... we saw the same thing with the forces that he sent to the American southern border, which was not at all justified from a practical point of view, putting aside what you feel about immigration policy or not. There was no invasion going on when he sent... To move away from politics to business, where I spend most of my time, my good word is that you walk the streets of Tel Aviv, and even in the stormy, rainy weather, you see delegations from around the world who are coming to do business here. I hope that we can continue that and continue it in a peaceful way.
And I was very happy to hear that there are a group of young volunteers in Israel who choose every week and every month to find a different project, and they just go and they do something positive. It's not a non-for-profit, it's just people doing good stuff. It's always nice to hear about people doing good stuff in our country.
Thank you for being with us. Have a good week.
The Jerusalem Gift Shop, 10% off everything. Coupon code ILTV.